The morning shift aboard the orbital station, Harmony's Edge, began like any other in the past 3,000 years. The vast metal structure rotated slowly above the gas giant Viridian, its sensors sweeping the empty void with mechanical precision. Commander Thex of the Cytherian Navy sipped his morning brew, watching the data streams flow across holographic displays in peaceful, predictable patterns. The sacred silence had given the galaxy exactly what it promised: 3 millennia of perfect peace. No military vessels dared break the ancient treaty by using faster-than-light communications during patrol runs. No aggressive scanning was permitted beyond system boundaries. The 47 species of the Galactic Council had learned to whisper instead of shout, and the universe had rewarded them with tranquility. "Another quiet day in paradise," muttered Sensor Operator Vex, her 6 arms dancing across the control panels with practiced ease. The Trilaxian's compound eyes reflected the soft blue glow of the monitoring equipment. "Sometimes I wonder if we even need these stations anymore." But Elder Diplomat Koval of the Wraith had spent too many years studying the patterns of war and peace to trust such quietude completely. His scaled fingers traced across the latest deep space monitoring reports that had arrived via slow-channel transmission from the outer rim. The energy signatures made no sense. Massive power sources moving through dead space, each one registering energy outputs that should have torn apart any known starship design. Equipment malfunctions, the Council's Technical Advisory Board had declared unanimously. Cosmic radiation interfering with long-range sensors, nothing more. Koval's elongated skull tilted as he studied the data again. His species had survived 2 galactic wars by never dismissing anomalies as mere equipment failures. The Wraith had learned that the universe always whispered its warnings before it screamed. 3 sectors away, on the ancient archaeological world of Terminus, Dr. Neela brushed centuries of dust from yet another carved stone tablet. The Altarian archaeologist's 4-fingered hands moved with reverent care as she uncovered symbols that matched no known living language. This was the 12th such discovery in the past solar cycle, each one found in ruins that predated the sacred silence by thousands of years. The warning was always the same, regardless of the extinct civilization that had carved it. When the Silent Ones return, the galaxy will never be the same. Dr. Neela's research assistant, a young Vorthan named Kelp, hovered beside her on gossamer wings. "Professor, these symbols, they appear on worlds that were separated by thousands of light years. Species that never developed space travel, never met each other. How could they all know about the same mythical beings?" The archaeologist's bioluminescent markings pulsed thoughtfully. "Perhaps they weren't mythical, Kelp. Perhaps they were very real and very dangerous." The tablets described bipedal creatures of impossible cunning and adaptability. They spoke of beings who could survive in the vacuum of space, who built vessels that moved faster than light itself, who turned entire star systems into weapons when threatened. Every extinct civilization had called them something different, but the description remained consistent: apex predators who had chosen to vanish into the great void, leaving behind only warnings and legends. Back on Harmony's Edge, the night shift brought new mysteries. Sensor Operator Vex had been replaced by her colleague Zahn, whose cybernetic implants allowed him to process data streams that would overwhelm organic minds. The robotic enhancement hummed softly as it filtered through thousands of sensor readings. "First second, Commander Thex," Zahn called out, his mechanical voice cutting through the station's ambient hum. "I'm detecting gravitational anomalies in Sector 77 Alpha. The distortions suggest massive objects moving at sublight speeds, but our sensors show empty space." Thex's tentacles coiled with nervous energy. "How massive?" "Each object appears to have the gravitational signature of a small moon, sir. But they're maintaining perfect formation and adjusting course in ways that natural celestial bodies simply cannot." The commander's skin shifted to a deep purple, the Cytherian equivalent of a frown. "Could they be using some form of stealth technology?" "Unknown, sir, but whatever they are, they're heading directly toward the inner systems. ETA to the nearest inhabited world is approximately 72 standard hours. Across the galaxy, Similar reports began filtering through the Council's slow-channel communication networks. Gravitational shadows where nothing should exist. Energy. Readings that defied physics. Deep space monitoring stations going offline without explanation. Their final transmissions speaking of impossible geometries and ships the size of cities. Elder diplomat Koval felt his scales bristle as he received the latest intelligence briefing. The pattern was becoming clear. Something was emerging from the galactic rim, moving with purpose and coordination that suggested intelligence beyond anything the Council had encountered. The sacred silence had kept the galaxy peaceful by ensuring that no one could move fast enough or communicate efficiently enough to wage war on a galactic scale. But now something was approaching that had never signed the treaty, never agreed to the limitations that bound the 47 species together. Dr. Nyla's latest translation sent chills through the archaeological community. They who hunt between. The stars return not as conquerors, but as harbingers of change. The silent ones bring evolution or extinction. The choice belongs to those who remain. The quiet galaxy was about to become very loud indeed. The first sign wasn't an explosion or a flash of light. It was silence, a different kind of silence, that made every sensor array in the Wraith system scream warnings into the void. Space itself seemed to hold its breath as three massive shapes materialized at the edge of the star system, their emergence from hyperspace creating ripples that registered on gravitational detectors across 12 sectors. Commander Thex gripped the arms of his command chair aboard Harmony's Edge as his screens flickered and died, then slowly came back online. What in the void was that? Sensor operator Zahn's cybernetic implants sparked as they struggled to process the incoming data. Sir, I'm reading 3 objects, each measuring approximately 15 kilometers in length. They're not broadcasting any identification signals. Sir, they're not moving. They're just there. The human dreadnoughts hung in space like ancient monuments carved from shadow and steel. Their hulls absorbed sensor scans rather than reflecting them, creating dark spots in space where the eye wanted to look but found nothing to focus on. No running lights, no engine glow, no signs of life, yet every spacefarer in the system could feel their presence like a weight pressing down on reality itself. Captain Yon Ho of the Wraith Defense Fleet scrambled 3 patrol cruisers within the first hour. His scaled hands trembled as he opened communication channels, broadcasting on every known frequency. Unknown vessels, you have entered Wraith territorial space. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions. Nothing. The dreadnoughts maintained their positions with mathematical precision, not drifting even a centimeter, despite the gravitational pull of the nearby gas giant. They didn't scan, didn't probe, didn't acknowledge the increasingly frantic transmissions filling the comm channels. Try the old frequencies, suggested Navigation Officer Kelm, her 4 arms working frantically at her console. Maybe they use pre-council communication protocols. Captain Yon Ho authorized emergency channels that hadn't been used in centuries. Unknown vessels, this is Captain Yon Ho of the Wraith Defense Fleet. We mean no harm, but your presence is causing widespread system disruption. Please respond. Hours passed. The alien ships remained as motionless as death, their very stillness more intimidating than any weapon display could have been. Emergency council meetings convened across the galaxy as word spread through the slow channel networks. 47 species held their collective breath, waiting for some sign of intent from the silent giants. Then, after 18 hours of perfect silence, a voice crackled through the comm systems. It spoke in flawless galactic standard, with an accent that belonged to no known species. This is Captain Su Jin of the United Earthship Horizon. We've been watching your little peace treaty for quite some time now. Honestly, we're not impressed. The voice was calm, almost conversational, but it carried an underlying tone that made experienced warriors check their weapon systems. Captain Yon Ho's scales shifted to a deep blue, the Wraith equivalent of shock. Earthship? Are you claiming to be human? Humans are mythological. They don't exist. A sound came through the speakers that took several moments to identify. Laughter. Mythological? That's adorable. We've been observing your species since before your great-great-grandparents learned to count past 10. We watched you discover fire, develop agriculture, and eventually stumble into space. We've seen every war you've fought, every peace treaty you've signed, every mistake you've made. The implications hit the council chambers like a plasma torpedo. If these beings were telling the truth, then humanity had been watching galactic civilization develop for millennia while remaining completely hidden. The technological superiority required for such long-term observation boggled the mind. Elder Diplomat Koval's voice joined the growing conference call from the council homeworld. If you've been watching us, why reveal yourselves now? Because your sacred silence has become sacred stagnation, Captain Sujin replied. 3,000 years of tiptoeing around each other, afraid to make noise, afraid to advance, afraid to explore. You've turned the entire galaxy into a retirement home for the timid. The insult stung, but what followed was worse. Captain Sujin began listing specific details from classified council meetings, military exercises that were supposedly secret, and private conversations between world leaders that no outside observer should have been able to monitor. "Have you infiltrated our governments?" accused Council Speaker Vorth, his gas-breathing apparatus hissing with agitation. "Infiltrated? We never needed to. You broadcast everything you do into open space like children playing dress-up. You're advanced." Encryption codes were broken by our university students as homework assignments. As the hours passed and more human revelations emerged, a joint council fleet began assembling. 12 species contributed their finest warships, battle cruisers that had kept the peace for centuries, bristling with weapons that could crack planets in half. Admiral Kess of the Trilaxian Navy commanded the response fleet from her flagship, Unified Resolve. If they want to talk, they can do it properly with respect for galactic law and council authority. The fleet approached the human dreadnoughts in standard diplomatic formation, weapons powered but not targeted, shields raised, but not at maximum strength. It was a show of strength meant to command respect while avoiding outright aggression. That's when the humans revealed their true nature. The space behind the 3 dreadnoughts shimmered like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Reality seemed to bend and twist as something massive began to decloak. The first glimpse showed a hull section larger than the biggest space station in Council space. Then more sections appeared. Weapon arrays that dwarfed entire battleships, engine clusters that could power small suns, and a superstructure that seemed to go on forever. The dreadnoughts, these 15-kilometer giants that had terrified the galaxy, were nothing more than escort craft. Behind them, a human mothership the size of a small moon slowly revealed itself, its presence causing spatial distortions that registered on sensors 3 star systems away. Admiral Kess stared at her tactical displays in stunned silence. Every instinct told her to retreat, but her pride as a military officer demanded she hold position. How long has that been there?" Captain Sujin's voice carried a hint of amusement. "Since before your fleet left port, Admiral. We've been watching you practice your approach formations for the past 2 days. Very predictable, by the way. You might want to work on that." The galaxy had just learned that humanity didn't just exist. They had been the unseen apex predator all along, watching from the shadows while civilizations played at being advanced. The age of peaceful ignorance was about to end. The Council's emergency session had been going for 6 straight hours when Admiral Hyunwoo's holographic image materialized in the center of the Great Assembly Chamber. Unlike the other species, representatives who appeared in formal diplomatic attire, the human admiral wore what looked like a simple black uniform that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. "How you want a demonstration of our capabilities," Admiral Hyunwoo said, his voice carrying easily through the vast chamber, despite speaking barely above a whisper. "Very well. But I suspect you're thinking about this all wrong." Council Speaker Vorth's breathing apparatus hissed nervously. "We wish to understand your technological level, your military strength, your intentions toward peaceful galactic society." The human admiral smiled, an expression that somehow managed to be both reassuring and deeply unsettling. "Military strength? We stopped thinking in those terms about 1,000 years ago. Let me show you what we actually consider important." The massive view screen activated, showing the human science vessel, Discovery, floating peacefully in the asteroid belt of Anhei. uninhabited system. The ship looked nothing like the intimidating dreadnoughts. It was sleek, curved, almost organic in appearance. Delicate sensor arrays extended from its hull like the petals of some impossible flower. "Watch carefully," Admiral Hyunwoo instructed. This should be educational. As the Council watched, the Discovery approached a large asteroid. But instead of using mining lasers or explosive charges like any normal civilization, something extraordinary happened. The ship's hull began to flow and reshape itself, extending tendrils of what looked like liquid metal toward the space rock. "Programmable matter," explained Admiral Hyunwoo as the tendrils touched the asteroid and began to dissolve it at the molecular level. "We don't mine resources. We convince them to join us voluntarily." Elder Diplomat Koval's scales rippled with amazement. "The asteroid is being converted in real time. How is this possible?" "We learned to work with matter instead of against it. Every atom in that rock is being catalogued, sorted, and repurposed. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is destroyed. It's simply changing from one useful form to another." But the real shock came when the camera focused on the crew working outside the ship. They moved through the vacuum of space without protective suits, their skin glowing with a faint blue radiance. Some appeared entirely human, while others showed subtle modifications, extra limbs that moved with perfect coordination, eyes that reflected light like mirrors, skin that seemed to shift between solid and energy states. "Are those still human?" whispered Admiral Kess of the Trilaxian Navy. "They're more human than we were 1,000 years ago," Admiral Hyunwoo replied. "We never stopped evolving. While your species focused on maintaining peaceful stagnation, we pushed the boundaries of what biology could become." One of the crew members outside the Discovery noticed the observation camera and waved cheerfully. Then, to the Council's amazement, he began to speak, and his voice carried clearly through the vacuum of space. "Hello, Council observers. Beautiful day for asteroid processing, isn't it?" The modified human gestured toward the steadily dissolving rock. "We should have this converted to useful materials within the hour. The molecular assemblers are working at peak efficiency today." "How is he speaking in vacuum?" demanded Captain Yon-ho of the Wraith Defense Fleet. "He's not speaking through air," Admiral Hyunwoo explained patiently. "He's modulating electromagnetic fields to create sound directly in your receivers. Basic physics, really." The demonstration continued as the Council watched in fascination and growing dread. The Discovery didn't just mine the asteroid, it transformed it into completed components for what appeared to be another starship. Hull plating, engine components, computer systems, all assembled from raw rock in a matter of minutes. But the real demonstration began when long-range sensors detected incoming ships. "Unknown vessel, this is Captain Gorth of the Morgul Raider." "Fleet," came a harsh transmission. "You're operating in our territory. Prepare to be boarded and surrender your cargo." The Morgal were notorious throughout the galaxy, a species of aggressive pirates who preyed on isolated ships and weak convoys. Their vessels were crude but effective, bristling with weapons cobbled together from a dozen different technologies. "Admiral," Hyunwoo sighed audibly, "Captain Minho, you're receiving some uninvited guests. Please handle this diplomatically." On the screen, the human captain of the Discovery opened a communication channel. His voice was polite, almost friendly. "Morgal, vessels, you're interfering with a peaceful scientific operation. Please adjust your course and continue on your way." Captain Gorth's laughter was harsh and grating. "Soft humans, we've heard about your kind. All talk, no fight. Prepare to die slowly." The Morgul fleet consisted of 12 heavy raiders, each, one bristling with plasma cannons and missile launchers. They accelerated toward the Discovery in a classic attack formation, weapons charging with visible energy buildup. "Captain Minho," Admiral Hyunwoo's voice carried a note of mild concern. "They seem determined to be unpleasant." "Understood, Admiral," came the reply. "Initiating standard defensive protocols." What happened next lasted exactly 3.7 seconds, according to the timestamp on the recording. The Discovery didn't move, didn't fire weapons, didn't even raise shields. Instead, the space around the Morgul fleet seemed to shimmer slightly, like heat distortion on a summer day. Then the pirate ships simply weren't there anymore. No explosion, no debris, no energy discharge. 12 vessels containing over 3 100 hostile aliens had been reduced to their component atoms so quickly that their final screams were cut off, mid-syllable. The council chamber fell into absolute silence. "What did you do?" Speaker Vorth finally managed to whisper. Captain Minho's voice remained conversational. "We asked them politely to leave. When they refused, our mining equipment dealt with the obstruction. The molecular disassemblers don't distinguish between asteroids and unwelcome visitors. Matter is matter." Admiral Hyunwoo addressed the stunned council representatives. "You wanted to see our military capabilities. What you just witnessed wasn't a weapon system. It was industrial equipment responding to a minor inconvenience. Our actual defensive systems are significantly more impressive." The human admiral's image flickered slightly as he prepared to disconnect. "The universe is vast and full of wonders waiting to be discovered. Your sacred silence has kept you safe, but it's also kept you small. We're offering you the chance to grow beyond your current limitations." As his hologram faded, Admiral Hyunwoo left the council with a final thought. Evolution never stops, whether you participate or not. The question is whether you want to be part of the future or just another layer in its fossil record. The HFY Great Assembly Chamber remained silent for a long time after the humans signed off, each species representative contemplating what they had just witnessed. The galaxy had just learned that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't destruction. It was the absolute certainty that resistance was not just futile, but literally impossible. The Great Council Chamber on Unity Station had never seen such chaos. Representatives from 47 species filled the vast amphitheater, their voices creating a cacophony of fear, anger, and desperate planning. Some demanded immediate military action against the human threat. Others called for surrender before humanity decided to demonstrate more of their casual, godlike powers. Speaker Vorth's breathing apparatus worked overtime as he tried to maintain order. "The emergency session will come to order. We must decide our response as a unified galactic community." But unity was the last thing anyone could see. The Cytherian delegation huddled in one corner, their tentacles coiled tight with anxiety. The Trelaxian representatives buzzed among themselves, their compound eyes reflecting the panic spreading through the chamber. Even the normally stoic Wreath showed signs of stress, their scales shifting through rapid color changes. "They dissolved 12 ships like they were made of sugar," shouted Admiral Kess, her 6 arms gesturing wildly. "How do we fight something that can unmake matter itself?" Captain Yonho's voice cut through the noise. "Maybe we don't fight them. Maybe we find a way to coexist. They said they've been watching us for centuries without interfering. That shows restraint." Restraint? Elder Diplomat Koval's scales turned a deep red. "They've been spying on us, studying us like laboratory specimens. How is that restraint?" The debate raged for hours. Species that had been allies for millennia now found themselves on opposite sides. The Morgul incident had shattered more than just pirate ships. It had broken the galaxy's sense of security. Then, without warning, the chamber's main lights dimmed. Security Chief Kelmar's robotic enhancements whirred as he scanned for threats. All defensive systems show normal operation. No hull breaches detected. No unauthorized ships in the area. But something was wrong. The air itself seemed to thicken, and a strange humming sound began to resonate through the station's superstructure. Several representatives reached for personal weapons, while others activated emergency communication devices. That's when she walked through the wall. The first sign was a ripple in the solid metal bulkhead, as if the hull plating had turned to water. Then a figure stepped through, not through a door or airlock, but directly through 3 meters of reinforced durasteel, as if it were nothing more than morning mist. Ambassador Jiwoo appeared to be human, but her very presence defied physics. Her form shimmered constantly between solid matter and something that looked like concentrated starlight. When she moved, reality seemed to bend around her, creating small distortions in the air that made watching her both fascinating and deeply unsettling. "Good afternoon, Council representatives," she said, her voice carrying perfectly through the chamber despite the impossible acoustics of her position. "I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but your security protocols don't account for fourth-dimensional transit." Several guards raised their weapons, but the energy beams passed harmlessly through her shifting form. She wasn't dodging the shots. The weapons simply had nothing solid to target. "Please, there's no need for hostility," Jiwoo continued, stepping down from the wall onto the chamber floor. Where her feet touched the metal decking, small ripples spread outward like she was walking on the surface of a pond. "I'm here to discuss terms, not to fight." Speaker Vorth's breathing apparatus wheezed as he struggled to process what he was seeing. What are you?" "I'm human, of course, just not limited by the same physical constraints that bound my ancestors." Jiwoo's form stabilized slightly, becoming more solid and recognizable. "We've spent the last 1,000 years learning to work with the fundamental forces of reality instead of being trapped by them." She gestured, and holographic images filled the air above the assembly. The council saw human colonies that existed in the hearts of stars, cities built in the spaces between dimensions, and beings that had transcended the need for physical bodies, entirely while still remaining recognizably human. "This is what we've become while you've been maintaining your sacred silence," Jiwoo explained. "We didn't just develop better technology. We became something greater than what we were, the you are." Images shifted to show the galaxy as humanity saw it, a vast garden of potential being wasted by species too afraid to push boundaries. Civilizations that could have reached for the stars, but chose to stay safely within their own systems. Technologies that could have revolutionized existence, but were deemed too dangerous to pursue. "Your peace treaty has kept you safe," Jiwoo acknowledged. "But safety and growth are often incompatible. You've chosen stagnation over evolution, comfort over advancement." Elder Diplomat Koval found his voice. "And what gives you the right to judge us? We've maintained peace for 3 millennia. The right of those who refuse to stop growing," Jiwoo replied without hostility. "The universe doesn't care about your peace treaty. It continues to expand, to change, to evolve. New threats emerge from the dark spaces between galaxies. Energy, beings that feed on civilizations, mechanical swarms that convert entire star systems into raw materials, forces that make your old wars look like children's games." The holographic display showed glimpses of cosmic horrors, vast entities that dwarfed solar systems, self-replicating machines that consumed galaxies, and predator species that treated entire civilizations like cattle. "These threats are coming, whether you're ready or not," Jiwoo continued. "Humanity has encountered some of them already. We've learned to fight them, to defend against them, to sometimes reason with them. But we can't protect a galaxy full of species that refuse to grow beyond their current limitations." Captain Yonho leaned forward in his chair. "Are you threatening us?" "I'm offering you a choice." Jiwoo's form brightened, her voice taking on an almost musical quality. "Join us in pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Share in the technologies and capabilities we've developed. Help us prepare for the challenges that are coming from beyond this galaxy." She paused, and her form began to shift back toward its energy state. "Or remain as you are, content with your small corners of space and your limited understanding of reality. We won't force you to evolve, but we also won't protect those who choose to remain children." The ultimatum hung in the air like a physical weight. Species representatives looked at each other with new understanding. This wasn't about conquest or domination. It was about survival on a cosmic scale that they had never imagined. "How long do we have to decide?" Speaker Vorth asked quietly. Jiwoo's form was almost entirely energy now, beautiful and terrible to behold. "The universe won't wait for you to make up your minds. Some of you have already begun to understand. We've detected several species, starting to experiment with technologies beyond your current treaties. The choice isn't really whether to evolve. It's whether to evolve with our guidance or to try stumbling forward alone." As she began to fade back through the wall, her final words echoed through the chamber with perfect clarity. "Humanity grew up in the dark between the stars. We learned to thrive in impossible conditions and to become more than we were born to. We're offering to teach you the same lessons. But the classroom is the entire universe, and the final exam has already begun." The wall solidified behind her, leaving no trace that she had ever been there except for the small ripples still spreading across the chamber floor where she had walked. The galaxy's age of innocence was over. The question now was whether its species would grow up in time to survive what was coming. The transformation began slowly, then accelerated beyond anyone's wildest imagination. Within the first month after Ambassador Jiwoo's ultimatum, 12 species had formally requested partnership with humanity. By the third month, that number had grown to 23. Now, 6 months later, the galaxy bore no resemblance to the peaceful, stagnant civilization that had existed under the sacred silence. Captain Yon-ho stood on the observation deck of the newly rebuilt Harmony's Edge, watching something that would have been impossible just months before. The dying world of Kepler 442b, a planet that had been stripped of its atmosphere by ancient solar flares, was being reborn before his eyes. Human terraforming ships worked in perfect coordination, each one no bigger than a standard frigate, but capable of reshaping entire continents. They didn't use massive atmospheric processors or centuries-long climate adjustment programs. Instead, they convinced the planet itself to remember what it had been like when it was alive. The atmospheric composition is stabilizing ahead of schedule, reported his science officer, Lieutenant Kess, her trilaxian compound eyes reflecting the blue-green glow of the reborn world. Oxygen levels are approaching optimal ranges for most known species. How are they doing this so quickly? Captain Yon-ho's scales shifted to a thoughtful purple. They're not just adding atmosphere. They're rewriting the planet's entire molecular structure. Watch the northern continent. As they observed, vast deserts began to bloom with vegetation that seemed to grow in fast forward. Rivers carved new paths through landscapes that had been barren for millennia. Mountain ranges shifted and reformed to create optimal weather patterns. It wasn't terraforming in any traditional sense. It was resurrection on a planetary scale. The transformation wasn't limited to dead worlds. On Trilax Prime, the ancient plague that had kept the species' population in check for over 2,000 years had simply vanished overnight. Human medical ships had arrived, analyzed the pathogen for exactly 37 minutes, then released microscopic healers into the atmosphere. By morning, not a single case remained on the entire planet, but the most dramatic changes were happening. To the species themselves, young Wreath cadets who had volunteered for human partnership programs were returning home as something magnificent and terrifying. They still looked like Wreath, scaled skin, elongated skulls, the same basic body structure. But they moved through space without protective suits, communicated through direct neural links, and displayed casual mastery over technologies that their parents couldn't even comprehend. Cadet Veltar had been gone for only 3 months, but when she returned to visit her family, she walked through the airlock of their space station like she was strolling through a park. Her scales now shifted, through colors that had no names, and her eyes held depths that seemed to reflect starlight from distant galaxies. "Mother, father," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated in dimensions beyond normal hearing. "I wanted to see you before my next assignment." Her parents, elder diplomat Koval and his mate Senna, looked at their daughter with a mixture of pride and profound loss. She was still their child, but she had become something beyond their understanding. "Where are you going next?" Senna asked, her voice barely concealing her emotions. "To the Andromeda Transit Station," Veltar replied, as casually as she might. "Have once mentioned a trip to the local trading post. We've made contact with a civilization there that's been isolated for millions of years. They need help preparing for the convergence." "The convergence?" Koval's scales rippled with concern. Veltar's expression grew serious. "Something is coming from beyond the galactic rim, father. The humans have known about it for centuries. That's why they revealed themselves now, because hiding in the shadows won't work against what's approaching." She gestured, and holographic images filled the family's modest living space. They showed vast mechanical entities the size of solar systems, energy beings that consumed entire star clusters, and stranger things that defied description. The scope of the threat made their old concerns about territorial disputes and trade agreements seem laughably small. "This is why we have to evolve," Veltar continued. "The universe is far more dangerous and wonderful than we ever imagined. The humans are trying to prepare us for challenges we can't even comprehend yet." Meanwhile, in the sectors that had refused human partnership, a different kind of transformation was taking place. The purist factions found themselves increasingly Isolated as their own populations chose to emigrate to human-allied worlds, entire colonies packed up and left, seeking opportunities and enhancements that their traditional governments couldn't provide. The Morgul Consortium, what remained of it after the pirate incident, had declared absolute hostility toward humanity and all human-allied species. They fortified their worlds, built new weapons, and proclaimed their intention to preserve pure galactic civilization. Humanity's response was devastating in its simplicity. They were ignored. No human ships visited Morgul space. No communication was acknowledged. No trade was offered. The consortium found themselves completely cut off from the galaxy's new economy and technological advancement. Within months, their society began to crumble from within, as younger generations demanded access to the wonders they could see happening everywhere else. Admiral Jamin of the human fleet made his final log entry from the bridge of the massive exploration vessel Pathfinder, as it prepared to depart for territories beyond the galactic rim. "The transformation is proceeding better than our most optimistic projections," he recorded, his enhanced voice carrying easily through the ship's neural network. 28 species have fully integrated with our partnership programs. 14 more are in various stages of negotiation. The remaining holdouts are experiencing natural population migration toward allied territories. He paused, looking out at the star field that represented humanity's next destination. Some observers call this conquest, but they misunderstand the fundamental nature of what we're doing. We didn't return to the galaxy to rule it. We returned to save it from itself. The universe doesn't negotiate with stagnation. It doesn't compromise with species that refuse to grow. The Pathfinder began to accelerate toward unknown regions where ancient threats stirred in the darkness between galaxies. Behind it, the transformed galaxy continued its rapid evolution, species working together on projects that would have taken millennia under the old system. This was never about military dominance or political control. Admiral Jamin's final words echoed through space. This was natural selection operating on a galactic scale. We simply offered to be evolution's gentle hand instead of its cruel knife. Young beings across the galaxy looked up at stars that held no fear, only infinite possibility. The sacred silence was dead, replaced by something far more profound, the sound of an entire galaxy learning to grow up, preparing for challenges that would either forge them into something magnificent or sweep them into extinction. The age of small thoughts and smaller dreams was over. The universe awaited, vast and dangerous and full of wonders beyond imagination. Humanity had opened the door. Now it was time to see who would have the courage to walk through it. In the end, silence had never been sacred at all. It had just been fear dressed up in the robes of wisdom, and fear humanity had learned long ago was just another limitation to be transcended. The end.